Hey guys, how you doing? Long time no speak, huh? So today I want to talk about something that I have been wanting to talk about for a while, and that is mindfulness meditation and the role of mindfulness meditation in my personal recovery, and how I think it can probably help you, or probably every single one of you actually, if you can do it. So let me just talk about that word a little bit, meditation. A lot of people know what it is. A lot of people have been practicing it and have a regular practice, but some people don't know what it is. And I just want to define it because that word gets used a lot by people who don't quite know what it means. I mean something very specific by it. It is a practice that you do, a technique that you do. It is anything that you do that where you focus, where you concentrate on an object. The classic object is, of course, the breath. So the sort of one of the most common ways that people meditate is they focus on the breath and they attempt to maintain their attention on the breath. And then every time they notice that their mind has wandered away from the breath, they just gently bring the attention back to the breath. Now you can replace breath with anything. You can replace it with body sensations, external sights or sounds. It can be a big target like just everything that you hear right now, or it could be a very narrow target like just focus on the tip of your nose and the breath. And this all falls under mindfulness meditation. So that's what I mean. I don't mean just sort of taking a walk in nature. While yes, that can be a meditative experience, kind of, sort of, I mean like a formal technique. So I've been meditating for like 10 years um, or more. I first learned about it many years ago. And I had a break there for like a couple of years where I did not meditate. And then I restarted it, and I've been meditating basically consistently every day almost, rarely skipping a day. And so the first thing I want to say about it is by itself, it was not sufficient to get me out of this rut, right? When I was, my understanding of what was happening with me was that I am damaged in some physical way, and there's some disease process going on, and there was something I should be worried about and scared about. When I had that conception of what was happening with me, I doubt any amount of meditation could help me, right? At the same time, I know a lot of people who have not done any meditation and who have recovered. If you read people's stories, not all of them have meditated. So it's not like some kind of an absolute requirement that you have to meditate in order to recover. It's neither necessary nor sufficient, but it's a huge help. For me personally, it has so many benefits, and it turbocharges everything else that you're going to, all of your efforts to facilitate recovery, to help yourself essentially, to get yourself out of this mess. All of them will be turbocharged if you practice mindfulness meditation, because the skills, the attentional skills that it facilitates in you are going to be applicable across the board, and in fact, in every domain of life, to be perfectly honest. So I'm not going to discuss today exactly how to do, I'm not going to give you a guided meditation or anything like that. I just want to talk around it and how specifically it's helped me, right? So, and what the benefits are. And I'm going to focus on the psychological benefits. There are many benefits that go sort of beyond the psych. So meditation is a tool to help us understand ourselves. And we can understand ourselves on at least two levels that I can think of. One level we all sort of kind of get, it's the psychological level. How do we experience emotions? How do we react to things? What do we worry about? Do we worry a lot? What kind of things trigger us, etc., etc. Like, that's the sort of psychological level. That's what I'm going to focus on, and it's very important for recovering from this. I just want to mention in passing, just for completion's sake, that there's also a kind of I don't want to say a deeper level, but in a sense it is a deeper level, that sort of, by observing a lot your own consciousness, you get to see exactly how consciousness is constructed and how your sense of self arises. And that is not a better or worse level to understand yourself at. It's just another level that you understand yourself at. And in fact, the psychological level and the more fundamental level, I hesitate to call it the spiritual level, but we could. They're interrelated. But the bulk of the benefit, I think, is most immediately appreciable in when you think about the psychological level. So when we make changes, when we talk about psychological aspects of recovery, we focus on emotions and being aware, just emotionally aware, and allowing our emotions to live inside us rather than trying to suppress them in some way, avoid them, because they still find a sort of a way to manifest. They generate energy. That's what they do, and that energy has to go somewhere. Something happens. So one of the strategies that we employ in recovery is we try to become aware of what we're feeling, and we try to sort of take an accepting attitude towards it. Like, that's just, we're human beings, we're alive, we have an emotional life, and we allow that emotional life to proceed. And by processing our emotions, perhaps some things we did not previously process, we can hopefully move forward. So with mindfulness meditation, you become much more aware of all of the processes going on in your sensory experience, in your consciousness, all that subjective experience that we're living all the time. You become far more aware of it than a person who does not meditate, or the same version of you who's not a meditator, because you're practicing, right? You're developing an attentional skill set. And when you do that, you become better at detecting emotion or something. And when I say emotion, I'm going to be very specific. I'm talking about we can sort of divide our inner life into three components. It's the thoughts, meaning the inner talk, right? That voice inside our head that's talking to us. It's the imagery that we get in our consciousness, right? Like, for example, we see that person that has hurt us in our mind, in our mind's eye. And those images are usually not very vivid, but it's there. If you pay attention, it's there. And all the bodily sensations, emotions, they generate bodily sensations in us. And so all of that stuff, if we meditate, and in fact we could employ specific techniques that sensitize us to those modalities, the inner talk, the inner imagery, and the bodily sensations, emotional bodily sensations. We can even sort of take special practices to focus on that. They make us just aware of when that's happening, and we also learn to take an accepting attitude. A word for this is equanimity, or you might say a non-judgmental attitude, just letting it be, not fighting it, not resisting it, but just letting it be, letting it work its way through our body, through our mind, through our consciousness, and just allowing it to burn itself out, essentially, because everything passes. Every emotion eventually burns itself out and passes. Another thing that we discuss is how we react to things. A lot of us are very sensitive. We get triggered easily. We are very reactive, and because we're always in this sort of an aroused, tense, sort of anxious state, and just by meditating, that actually brings down the level of arousal and makes us less reactive. And if we keep the practice up, our baseline level of reactivity, month by month, reduces. Comes down bit by bit. And when we do react, we learn to catch ourselves earlier, and sometimes we learn to increase the gap between stimulus that would ordinarily trigger us and a response that we take. So rather than just stimulus automatic response, we develop the space between the stimulus and response where we can begin to make a conscious choice about, okay, how do I want to react to this? Okay, I've been triggered. I can see that right now, right? And how do I want to respond? Is it worth getting angry for? Or how angry should I get, kind of thing. Now, we don't always have that choice, of course. And the bigger the trigger, the more challenging, of course, it is to do this. But that's why we practice. And over months and years, frankly, of practice, we get better and better. And we're able to handle stronger and stronger stimuli consciously, making a conscious choice rather than just reacting on autopilot. So that's another way that mindfulness meditation is a big help. A third way that also ties into all this is we typically tend to have similar personality traits: perfectionism, anxiety, sort of people-pleasing, achievement-oriented, conscientious, and other things that maybe are not as common but are also sort of contributing. Whatever it is, again, mindfulness skills make us more aware of these tendencies, right? And when we change any of these tendencies, the very basic formula that I found is that the first step is you become aware of it and you sort of recognize, oh, it's happening and it's a problem. I want to change this, right? And that's like half the battle. If you just notice every time, for example, for me, every time I get perfectionistic and I start like really getting tense about something and just grabbing on and trying to control every little detail, much of which is outside of my control actually, but I just keep noticing it over and over again. That's like just noticing it and saying, there I go again. And this is happening so many times a day. This is like a thing that happens throughout the day, every day, I'm working with it. But it's not as hard as it sounds, because eventually it becomes just something you do. It's kind of effortless. You just begin to notice it. And bit by bit, just the noticing itself causes you to shift and not be as perfectionistic. And it's a slow process. For me, it has been slow, at least. Maybe in some people it goes a little faster, I don't know. But bit by bit, I've made a real change, man. Like, if I compare myself to a year ago, there's a difference. There's a big difference. So in the short term, it feels like, oh man, I'm barely making any progress. And nothing is the same, nothing has changed. Everything is the same. But then when you look back 3 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, you see, oh no, I've really changed, and I'm a different person. So that's the other benefit of mindfulness meditation, is it's helping you to shift or attenuate certain personality traits that are causing you suffering and, in fact, are in many ways the root of your symptoms. So we've discussed sort of just the traumatic experiences from the past and emotional processing. We've discussed reactivity. We've discussed personality traits. And let me just touch on one last thing before I wrap up this video, and that's just current stressors. And this kind of ties back with reactivity, right? Any difficulty that you're experiencing, mindfulness meditation and the attentional skills that it develops, they help attenuate that. So if you've got a boss that's a real pain in the ass at work or whatever, or you have conflict in your family or any kind of life situation type stressor, with mindfulness, with attentional skills, it just makes it that little bit easier, keeps you that much less tense, allows you to go through it with just that little bit more grace. And, believe me, every little bit counts, every little bit helps. And in the short term, it's so hard sometimes to get through a meditation session, and it's so hard to stay present in face of different difficulties, stressors, pains. But as I said earlier, when you do it consistently and you look back a few months back, a year back, you notice, yes, this is making a difference. One final note, of course, our most immediate problem is just the pain, the fatigue, and all these other symptoms, which are physical sensations in our body. And a crucial aspect of our recovery is recognizing that, yes, these are very real experiences. They are quite difficult, quite unpleasant. We don't want them. And yet they're here in our body, and we're experiencing them right now. And now we know consciously, having understood what's going on with us, that they're not dangerous. They're not a sign of disease or tissue damage. Again, assuming, I always emphasize this, assuming you've been examined by a doctor, and which you should definitely do if you haven't done that. You should be examined, appropriate tests should be run, and you should have heard from your doctor either like a diagnosis like, oh, you have CFS, fibromyalgia, whatever, or something like, well, there's nothing that we can find that's wrong with you. I got that a lot, So, but once you've gone through that process, once you've sort of been medically examined, now you know, okay, I do definitely know I have these sensations of pain and fatigue and all this other stuff. And yet I also know that there really isn't a problem. And that's a choice you have to make for yourself, it's a realization that I cannot force upon anyone, and that part is up to you, kind of. But that's the conclusion that I've come to. And so then now, when I'm dealing with these sensations of pain and fatigue that are unpleasant, well, I can just treat them as just that, just sensations. Mindfulness meditation helps with that aspect of recovery as well. Just especially when something is flaring up, a lot of pain, a lot of fatigue, you just feel like, whoa, overwhelmed with it. Well, it helps you be less overwhelmed, and it helps you just write it out, and know that, yeah, it'll be all right. I know how this works, sometimes it flares up and sometimes it subsides, and I just know that's not a problem. Mindfulness meditation helps you carry that attitude through when it gets really difficult, So that's been very briefly, my experience with mindfulness meditation and the benefits that I experienced with it. I'm curious to hear about your thoughts, your experiences, your questions, if you have any. I'll probably make more videos on this subject in the future, because I think it's a very big subject and a very important subject, and there's a lot of potential. It's a very powerful tool, I think, for recovery. So let's hear from you, and let me know what you think. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.